They were played recently in the PokerGO studio in the what's it called? The PokerGO Cup. I've been doing a lot of studying recently in preparation for the US Poker Open, which is taking place in March. I've been going through a lot of the hands and talking about a lot of the hands with poker coaching coach Justin Saliba, who actually just final tabled the $15,000 buy-in tournament there. He lost 3 out of 3 all-ins at the final table. Not lucky, but he has a lot of fun hands for us to go through where we talked about a lot of interesting spots that I would not have necessarily played the same way. So I wanted to share all of those with you today. Looks like we're streaming well enough. Hope everyone's doing fine. I see people trickling in. So good. Let's go ahead and get right to it. First hand, right off the bat. Seth Davies raises. Seth Davies is known to be good, strong GTO opponent, I think. He's maybe a little bit on the tighter side, but that's not bad. Definitely a good, strong player. He raises it up. Justin, this is Justin Saliba. He calls in the small blind. Flop comes 8-3-2. Justin checks. Seth makes a small continuation bet. If we are live, let me know. My streaming program's telling me maybe it's not working properly. I don't know. If anyone's here, say, I'm here in the chat box. That would be great. Also, click the like and subscribe button before we get too busy to remember to do it. All right. This is a spot where I think check calling and check raising are definitely fine options. When you're facing a really small continuation bet, your audio quality is poor. Audio should be pretty good. Whenever you are facing a small continuation bet, you definitely want to be sure you include some raises. If this is a spot where Seth bet bigger, which is not going to happen all that often, but if this is a spot where he does bet bigger, like say he bets 20,000, then I think you definitely want to be calling. But whenever you're facing this tiny bet, raising definitely becomes viable when you're playing very short stacked. You'll find that as you get shorter and shorter and shorter, hands like top pair are just good enough to get in. And notice we're only playing 31 big blinds deep in this scenario. So I think raising is fine, calling is fine. Justin does call. Let's see what the solver recommends in the spot, though. I know these images are a little bit difficult to see here, but I have it lined up to where you can see it as good as you possibly can. And as we see in this scenario, you actually are supposed to put in a roughly 3x raise with a lot of the 8s, right? And you may be surprised to see that this is a scenario where you actually should be raising stuff like Jack 8 and just getting it in. Even stuff like 8-5, you're raising and just getting it in. Is your voice different? I had a long night last night, not gonna lie. Watched some sporting events and drank some drinks. Anyway, I'm alive and well today, ready for all of you. Anyway. Okay, as we see, Jack 8 raises a lot. Now, when would you not want to raise the Jack 8? I'm not really sure. I think you probably just want to raise the Jack 8 in this spot, playing relatively shallow stacked. This is something I don't necessarily do all the time. Typically, as your pair gets a little bit worse, you start to do a whole lot more calling, right? So this is a spot where I think you can get it in if you feel inclined. Calling's fine too. I mean, the big takeaway here, though, is that when you're facing this really tiny continuation bet for 7,000, then you should be doing a lot of raising. If you were facing a bigger bet, you would do way less raising. Turns to 2. Justin now bets minimum 1 big blind. Who would have done this? Let's be honest. Who would have bet 1 big blind here? This is an interesting scenario. I think if the board was something like, let's say, 10, 6, 5, 5. Say it was 10, 6, 5, 5. I think that's the spot where if you had a 10, leading becomes really viable because you actually have a lot of 5s in your range. But I have to presume you really should not be doing a whole lot of leading on specifically a 2 or even a 3 when those bottom cards pair out of the big blind because you don't have a whole lot of 2s in your range, right? It's not like we're defending all the 2s in the big blind in this scenario. So I get the idea that we do want to lead this card sometimes. The question becomes, what do we really want to be leading with? And I think we don't want to be leading with middle pair type stuff a whole lot. I mean, I don't know. We're gonna look at the solver, see what it says. Justin does lead one big blind, though. Let's take a look at what it says here. GTO Solver actually does lead some portion of the time. How much does it lead? It leads using mostly a 2 big blind bet or 1 big blind bet, as you see. And mostly leading with 2s, mostly leading with draws. It actually does lead with some 3s as well. Interesting to see. So mostly 2s, mostly 3s. What does Jack 8 do? Jack 8 leads every once in a while. What is this program? This is PokerGO Solver. This is actually screenshots from PokerGO Solver. So we had them all lined up here. And kind of interesting to see you're supposed to be leading a decent amount in this scenario, right? I would not usually lead this 2, but GTO actually does lead the 2. What percentage at the time? 10% of the time. And this is a good example of spots where people like Justin, JustGTO Saliba, have studied more than I have, right? And he knows that you do lead this turn some portion of the time. And then he randomizes it, I presume, to the point that he actually does lead in this spot sometimes. And obviously a simplified strategy here where you just check everything would be fine, but you're going to be losing a little bit of EV compared to the absolute best players in the world. And since I'm going to be competing with the absolute best players in the world, then I sure better be setting up on these spots, right? All right, we lead 1 big blind. Seth Davies raises. Oh boy. What do we do now? When does it start? When does what start? The show's already started today. Currently, the US Poker Open is happening the PokerGO Cup is happening right now. The US Poker Open starts in mid-March. I'll be out there playing lots of those tournaments. All right, when we get raised, what do we do? I think our only option is to call in this spot, right? Justin does call. Let's look at the solver. Solver in this spot calls Jack 8 every time. Not a whole lot of raising. I'm actually a little bit surprised again to see any shoves in the spot because you do have to presume Seth is going to have some overpairs in his range, right? You absolutely cannot go around folding an 8 here. I know some people in the chat say they just want to fold. No. You got to realize, just like we're supposed to check raise the flop a lot facing the tiny bet, when you lead tiny, your opponent should raise some portion of the time. Because otherwise they're just letting you see the river really, really cheap with all sorts of draws, right? So take a look at all these hands that are considering to lead the river. We have stuff like 5-4. You really don't want to let 5-4 see the river for 1 big blind. 6-4, same story. Random overcards, right? Like Queen Jack. You really want to let Queen Jack river, Queen or Jack? Not really, right? So anyway, this is a spot where you should expect to get raised some portion of the time, especially if your opponent's good. Something a lot of people do not do correctly is they never raise whenever people lead. But if your opponent's especially supposed to be leading from a GTO point of view some portion of the time, you do need to raise some portion of the time. All right, anyway, the 8 here is clearly a call. You don't fold any 8s. What are we folding in this spot when we lead? We're folding out the total garbage, like king high, queen high, folding out some ace highs, calling with flush draws, obviously. All of these here are flush draws. And then we're jamming sometimes with what? We're jamming sometimes with some 2s, or re-raising sometimes with some 2s, and some flush draws that have overcards, which makes good sense, right? 5-4 every once in a while, it's probably hearts. Okay? Am I going to be in Vegas in the last week of March? No. Okay. Rivers is 3 of clubs. What do we do now? Take a second. Think about it. We bet small. Another weird spot, right? Interesting scenario. I have to presume we are supposed to be using big bets on this river a lot of the time, given he only has about a pot size bet remaining, right? But at the same time, this hand probably does not want to go for the big bet, because this hand, if you jam here, it's going to be kind of difficult to get called by too many worse hands, right? Whereas if we do lead small with this hand and perhaps some 3s every once in a while, we're not going to get raised off our hand very often, right? If we check here, Seth has an easy shove with overpairs, but if we bet small, we lose less, which is good. And if he has like ace high in the spot, he's going to feel very inclined to call as well, getting really, really good odds, right? So cool spot. Let's see what Solver likes in this scenario. On the river, Solver likes jamming for pot with a lot of threes, a lot of twos, and a little bit of tiny betting. A tiny, tiny bit of tiny betting. And you know what it bets really tiny? How does JustGTO Saliba know this? It leads tiny with the Jack-8 and the 10-8, mostly. Jack-8, 10-8, 3, X. Any bluffs? We have a few bluffs down here with Jack-High. Does JustGTO Saliba find the bluff with the Jack-6 suited sometimes for a tiny bet? I don't know. But we do see, again, if you're trying to play good, strong, perfect GTO poker, this is a scenario where, I think this is a bit of a corner case, but this is a scenario where the GTO strategy actually does lead small with the Jack-8 a lot. And Justin Saliba somehow found it. Small lead, gets called, we win. Nice hand. How would I have played this hand, and what do I need to learn from this hand? Opponent raises, I call, clearly. Flop, well, I call. Justin calls. I would have called. I would have probably went ahead and put in the check raise on the flop, which maybe actually is ideal. We saw GTO does like to do that. Turns a 2, check. I would have checked here. I would have played this hand totally differently. Check. Bet we get raised. We have an easy call, of course. River, I would have probably checked, but I like the small lead. I mean, the small lead makes a whole lot of logical sense. The question is how do we know how to go about implementing this in game? And again, this going back to this solver image, you're leading tiny almost never. 4 or 5% of the time we're leading tiny. And do you need that in your strategy? I don't know. I'm tempted to say we don't actually need this in our strategy for simplicity, but if you are studying and working hard on your game and literally trying to become the best poker player in the world, like Justin works all day, every day trying to do, these are things that the best players in the world know how to do very, very well. So pretty cool spot. Pretty cool spot. Do y'all like this hand? Do y'all like this format, by the way? Do you like going through hands of high stakes poker players? If you do, let me know. Click the like and subscribe button below. If we get a ton of likes, I'll know that you like this. If we get no likes, I'll know that you do not like this. Simple as that. All right, let's take a look at another hand. This hand features Nick Petrangelo and Sean Winter. Sean Winter is very loose, very aggressive, very battly. He likes to battle. Nick Petrangelo, good, strong GTO opponent who also is a good exploitative player. Nick's a very, very good player who knows how to play GTO well, but also knows how to adjust. This hand actually illustrates that very, 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 very nicely. So they are 2 off getting in the money here. So we're on the bubble. All right? They're close enough to the bubble. So Sean is raising 25 big blinds deep. He needs to be kind of tight, right? He must have a tight range to raise here because if you look around, lots of people are like kind of medium stacks, and Sean's not really incentivized to get too out of line. So he does go for a slightly bigger than minimum raise here because he really does want to disincentivize the big blind, Darren Elias, from calling, right? So he does go a little bit bigger. Nick has the ace-10 of diamonds in the small blind. I think calling's definitely fine. You got to be careful re-raising in this spot because if you do re-raise and get jammed on, you're actually not going to be in good shape at all with the ace-10 of diamonds. You don't really want to fold it. So this is a spot where I think calling makes a whole lot of sense. Obviously, it's not great if Darren Elias re-raises, but whatever. Ace-10 suit is a good hand to see the flop. Flop comes 7-6-6. Check, check, check. You should expect a lot of checks in this scenario from all players, really. Perhaps there should be some leads from Darren Elias, interestingly enough, because he's going to have some sixes and has a lot of like draws that have some equity. Plus, he's the big stack on the bubble. Big stacks do get to lead some portion of the time. I don't know what he has, but I have to presume if he does have some junky draws and some sixes, maybe some sevens, those don't mind leading. Anyway, turns a 3, check, check. Sean Winter goes for the small delayed continuation bet. Interesting. This is a spot where You may ask, why is he betting so small in this scenario? Because doesn't he want to price out the draws? But it turns out the answer is no. In this scenario, in multi-way spots where you don't really have a whole lot of nuts and your opponents could if they're good, they could be checking here with straights and sixes, right? You want to be betting small when you do go for a bet. You're going to find this is a very common thing that happens in paired boards in general. And as you are more multi-way, you're even more incentivized to go for smaller bets because you are going to be running into nuts sometimes. Petrangelo calls. This is a tough spot. It's a tough spot because we have Darren in the big blind, right? If this was heads up, obviously we would easily call. But whenever Darren's in the big blind, you are going to get called by Darren with just a random 7 or 6 or a 3 sometimes. He's going to raise sometimes. And it's a tough spot. Now, I will say, like I already said, Sean Winter is definitely on the loose, aggressive, battling side. So if there's ever a player to not fold against, it's Sean Winter. All right. We get to the river. Petrangelo leads small. 1.5 big blinds. Fun spot. Would you have led 1.5 big blinds in this scenario? I don't know, man. I don't know. I probably would have just checked and called. And then what happens? Sean Winter puts in almost all of his money. It's an annoying spot. But what actually happened in this hand is Petrangelo led small. Sean Winter immediately raised. And Petrangelo immediately called. You're thinking, what? And, yeah, wild hand. Because I'm sure Nick Petrangelo knows Sean Winter enjoys a good bluff. And there are a lot of potential bluffs in his range, right? If we know Sean Winter's supposed to check behind the flop a lot, as I'm sure he does, he's going to have a whole lot of unpaired hands in his range going to the river, right? So if he has a whole lot of unpaired hands in his range going to the river, if we check, sure, he's going to bet. But if we lead small, perhaps we get called by worse ace high sometimes. And we're also going to potentially induce a lot of bluffs. Because if you give Sean Winter random queen high or king high or jack high in the spot, he will go for the raise. He is not afraid. Sean Winter has the jack 10 offsuit. And Nick Petrangelo manages to win a big pot from a very, very strong opponent in this scenario with the ace high. Wild hand. My wife's texting me. 1 second. My wife wants to go to Connecticut in March. All right, sure. Okay. Would you have 3-bet from the small blind knowing it's Sean? No, because you don't really want to get it in the scenario on the bubble. Like, if anything, in this hand, if you 3-bet and Sean jams, I think you have to call it off against him in particular. But you really don't want to be getting it in on the bubble in this spot. So I think this is a spot where calling is definitely the right play. So let's just recap this hand. Check, check, check. As you would expect this to go a lot of the time. Turn is a 3. Check, check. Bet small, as you would expect from a lot of stuff. Call from ace high. Fine. River is where it gets interesting. Petrangelo does go for the small lead. And this is where Sean Winter decides to go for it. Notice he does not put himself all in. He gives himself a chance to sneak into the money or spin up his small stack, right? Because in this scenario, either he's getting called or he's not, right? And when you're bluffing in this spot, saving 6 big blinds is clearly very, very valuable. So I like the non-all-in here, I think. And I don't think you want to go all in with anything, really. Maybe exploitatively you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. And then Petrangelo calls it off. No problem. This hand is all about heads-up display stats and not GTO. True. But understand that we're playing poker, where GTO strategy is very relevant and exploiting is very relevant. This is clearly an exploitative play. That should be obvious if I did not make that clear. And Petrangelo gets a good exploit in and wins a very, very big pot from a good, strong, battling opponent. Nice hand. What is the point of the small lead? This is a river where you probably get to lead sometimes. I don't even know, really, because in reality, how many threes does Petrangelo have? I'm not sure. It's a tough one because we have not ran this weird GTO simulation here. First off, you have to use Munker Solver to run three-way simulations, which takes a lot of time. And also, we're on a bubble, which is also kind of a weird spot, right? But yeah, it's a weird hand for sure. Because I like neither player should have a whole lot of sixes or threes. And if anything, maybe Sean Winter even has more sixes. right? Because, I mean, I don't know. Like, he may have actually no sixes because we are on the bubble. Like I said, pre-flop, he has to be pretty tight. So, interesting scenario, right? Interesting scenario. You did not know this was a bubble. It would be hard for you to call a shove. I mean, look, so going back to exploiting, if you 3-bet this hand to get Sean Winter, you cannot fold the ace-10 suited. That would be criminally tight against him because he gets in there and battles, like I said. All right, here we have another hand. Ace, jack, offsuit. We are 2 off getting in the money, so again, very near the bubble. Take a look at all the stacks. We have Sean Winter under the gun with 5 big blinds. Justin Saliba has 24 big blinds in the cutoff. Nick Schulman has 30 big blinds. Jeremy Asmus has 31 big blinds. Everybody else has 40 or 50. Or 60 or 70. Take a second, think about it. What would you do in this scenario? I would tell you to pause the video and write what you would do in the comment section below, but we're live. So, type in the comment section. Type in the chat what you would do in the spot. Because this is a tricky one. This is a tricky one. .420 Poker says solvers do not account for pout implications. You can actually run spots accounting for pout implications. Just takes a long time. A simple solver like Pio solver heads up does not account for 3-way spots, etc., etc. All right. And does not account for pout implications. All right. What do we do here? I think we have really all viable options. I will say this is a spot where Darren should be pretty tight, I think. But maybe wider than you think, because if he does raise, yeah, he's going to get called by Ali in the big blind a lot. This is Ali Imsirovic. That's how you say his last name. Good, strong opponent. But this is a spot where Justin and Asmus have to be very tight, right? Because they really, really, really want to get in the money. Because essentially, Sean Winter's going to bubble, clearly. I say clearly, most of the time. And then either Schulman, Asmus, or Justin are going to end up getting in the money, 2/3 of the time. So you really, really, really do not want to play too crazy in these spots, which allows Darren with a solid medium stack to raise wider. Same thing for Petrangelo, right? He's the big stack. If he raises, now Darren has to be tight. So this is a spot where these players both get to raise a little bit wider than you may naturally think. Anyway, this is a spot where Justin has to be very, very tight, right? So this is a scenario where since he's going to be very tight to begin with, he doesn't really want to just rip it in with hands like aces and kings and queens, because those hands are clearly very, 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 very good, right? So we want to be 3-betting small with some hands, and we need to find some bluffs. What hands can we reasonably 3-bet and then fold in this situation? Well, I think hands like the ace-jack or ace-10 are right on the border, right? I think those hands are right on the border. And so, Justin does go for the 3-bet. Notice the small sizing, which is also interesting because, again, if you think about his range of something like aces and kings, maybe queens or shoves pre-flop, I'm not sure, but aces and kings and a bluff, you don't really care what odds you give your opponent because your aces and kings are smashing your opponent. Some people say call to see a flop. No, you don't really want to call on this spot. All right. Elias calls. Flop comes jack, 8, 7. Darren checks. Interestingly enough, as you get closer and closer to the bubble, this is a spot where you should actually be ripping it all in. We saw this whenever we went through short stack spots in the tournament masterclass at PokerCoaching.com, where on very coordinated boards with hands that are almost always good but vulnerable, like this one, you often want to just rip it in when you have about 1.5x pot behind. But we're not quite on the stone bubble. I realize it's very close. So, I think you can go either way between shoving or betting normal, not all in. So Justin does go for the medium bet. Darren calls. Turn is one of the worst cards in the deck. Check. Easy check now. We just prayed to get showdown against a worse jack, I suppose. River's a queen. Darren checks. Do we need to bluff this? Do we need to bluff this? What do you think? Can we get any better hands to fold? Like, what? What are we trying to get to fold here? Pretty much nothing. Is a set going to fold? I mean, maybe. Probably doesn't have a whole lot of sets. So, no. Just let it go check. And we win against the ace-8. Ooh, better question. Should the ace-8 have bluffed the river? What do you think? Certainly not picking on Darren Elias, good, strong, world-class opponent. But I think this ace-8 of spades has to bluff the river. I mean, it would be great if you had something like the ace of hearts in your hand, I suppose. But notice you don't really have a whole lot of unpaired ace-high in this scenario because you would have folded a lot of them on the flop, right? Or they have a better pair, right? You don't have the ace of hearts, 8 of spades in your range. I think this is a spot where the ace-8 like has to bluff. I mean, find better bluffs, right? It's one of your worst hands in your range at this point. Your opponent has almost no 10s in their range because they 3-bet pre-flop. And we're on the bubble. This is a spot where you can apply immense pressure to Justin. So yeah, I think Darren needs to go for the bluff on this river. Let's take a look at another hand we have lined up. Huge thanks to Justin Saliba for picking out all these hands and sharing poker knowledge with me. He's made a point to learn from many of the absolute best players in the world over the last few years, and he's crushing it. All right, Petrangelo raises. Bill Klein calls. Ali Imsirovic in the big blind with ace-9 offsuit playing 15 big blinds deep. What do you do with the ace-9 in this scenario? Take a second. Think about it. We are in the money. We're in the money already. It is worth noting, like I said, Petrangelo, very, very strong world-class opponent. Ali, also very, very strong world-class opponent. Two of the people who have studied deep ICM spots the most, as far as I know, they understand these spots very, 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 very well. Very, 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 very well. Well, this is a spot where Petrangelo can raise like decently wide, but not too wide, because he has to worry about the big stack, Bill Klein, getting after it. And I will say that Bill Klein will sporadically get after it, especially as the big stack. Also, that said, if you look around this table, if there's a time for Bill Klein to not really get after it, this is probably it, because Petrangelo and Bill Klein and Sean Winter all have pretty nice stacks, and they're going to get payout jumps a lot of the time just by kind of hanging out. So, it's a weird spot where if you think Bill Klein's range is like really wide and splashy, which I don't think it is, you should probably assume Bill Klein's range is good. If Bill Klein has a good range, what's that mean for your ace-9? Well, it's not great, right? And if you do shove here and Bill Klein does have something like, I don't even know, queen-jack suited, he may call it off. It's an annoying spot, but he may even decide to call it off, and then you get an all-in flipping, which would be very, very bad. So, in this scenario, if we think Bill Klein's range is stronger than normal, and obviously Petrangelo has a regular range, I think you're supposed to be tight. I mean, I'm not going to fib here. I would probably have shoved some portion of the time in this spot. I've definitely played with Bill Klein where he's in a loose splashy mode, and I've played with him where he is in a super nitty mode, depending on the scenario. So make sure you are paying attention to how your opponents are playing. But what does Ali do? I'm going to presume whatever Ali does is right. It's important to note, whenever you are watching some of the absolute best poker players in the world play poker, you should presume whatever they do is right. Never jam just to call. Ooh, I really don't like calling. Calling in this scenario is not great. Something went wrong with this page reload. Oh boy. Calling in this spot is not great because you're going to be super dominated. And if you make top pair, you're done. So anyway, Ali folds. 15 big blinds deep. Puts his ace-9 in the muck. No problem. 184 people. 63 likes only. Well, everybody doesn't love high-level poker strategy. If you love high-level poker strategy, click the like and subscribe button. I appreciate it. Also click the notification bell. We have some live shows every once in a while that sporadically pop up, and I want to make sure you do not miss them. Ali folds. And you know what? Bill Klein had the ace-queen offsuit. Would have called. Ali would have presumably been out. And instead, he gets to hang around and avoid the, marginal shove spot. All right. Let's take a look at another hand. Pocket tens. Pocket tens. Where are we in this tournament? $15,000 buy-in tournament, nearing the money. Justin has 40 big blinds. He raises it up. Bryn Kinney. Good, strong, battling player. 3 bets. Ugh, what do we do with the tens? Nearing the money. This is a spot where definitely all the other stacks are very, very, very relevant. I mean, I'm trying to think if I hate shoving. I think shoving is probably a little bit much nearing the money, but maybe it's just fine. That said, every time I shove, Brendan shows me the ace king and he beats me. Okay, we call. Flop comes 6, 5, 3. Check. Bet small. Take a second, think about it. Check and bet small. And the notes. Justin said he blundered this spot against Brendan. It's important to be honest with yourself. Most poker players don't think they do anything wrong. But I have Justin's notes here. He says, he blundered the spot, and he's sharing it with all of you. Think of the value and the immense learning opportunities we all have watching some of the absolute best poker players in the world, showing their plays and letting you know that they screwed up. So what would I have done here? This is a nasty one because the board is very coordinated, and really Bren should not have a whole lot of nut hands here. The tough thing is that you really just don't want to run into aces, kings, queens, and bubble. However, again, we discussed this earlier, right? Facing a small bet, especially out of position, you need to be putting in some raises. And I got to presume tens is like one of our best hands, and it's also very vulnerable, right? When you have one of your best hands and it's very vulnerable, you often do want to put in the raise. Now, question is, how much should we raise? And again, it depends like how we are nearing the bubble in this spot. If everybody has a lot of chips and there is no clear short stack, then I think probably just rip it in. As people get shorter and shorter, like say we're 2 off the money and there are two big blind stacks hanging around, probably want to be more inclined to call, maybe raise small, not sure. Let's take a look at what GTO says in this spot. Yeah, here we go. This is the right one. It shows that the pocket tens either jams or raises small or calls. Do whatever you want. I probably would have shoved here. A general rule of thumb, which is not necessarily accurate all the time, but in general, on boards that are low, you want to be jamming with some of your overpairs that are most vulnerable to being outdrawn, right? And you want to be raising small with the overpairs that are less likely to get outdrawn. Like we see here, Jack's min raises a ton, right? Notice, by the way, if you look at this GTO simulation, the hands up here in gray would have re-raised pre-flop. And we do see the tens would have re-raised some portion of the time pre-flop, right? So they're not in your range 100%. Jacks would have re-raised a lot pre-flop as well. So like I said, I think this hand, like re-raising, it's fine pre-flop. I think it can go either way. Definitely a tough spot. Definitely a tough spot. What does he call with in this scenario? All the hands in green, if you are new to Pio Solver, hands in green call, hands in blue fold, hands in gray are no longer in your range because you would have played them differently. And hands in red raise, and the darker color red raises bigger, lighter color red raises smaller. Sounds like the solver doesn't know what to do. Yeah. Well, from a GTO point of view, I mean, all the plays they're all viable. They're all viable. So what does Justin do? He goes for the minimum raise. Interesting. Bren calls. Turns the 5 of spades. Yuck. Yeah, I probably would have shoved this flop. I would have shoved with 10s, 9s, some flush draws, 8s probably. Maybe shoving 8s would have been a little bit too much. Notice that 8s actually does not shove, it checks and then calls. Anyway, that's probably what I would have done here. I mean, again, on the bubble, maybe you're supposed to be a little bit tighter, but it depends exactly what we mean by nearing the money, because that can mean we're like a lock to get in the money, in which case clearly you want to be way more cautious, or it could mean we are still decently far from the money. Whoops, wrong thing. Or we're still decently far from the money and we don't really care about the money yet. All right, turns to 5 of spades. What should we do? We have about a pot-sized bet left. A little bit less than a pot-sized bet. Weird spot. Weird spot because I really don't know what ranges are at play here. Whenever you check raise the flop, small, notice this was a min raise, right? 42 to 90. Bren's going to call you a lot. Bren's going to call you a lot, right? So I think this is a spot where, I mean, I don't know what to do. This is why I would have shoved. I will say that it is definitely worth noting that when you use a strategy of just like shoving in the spot, perhaps like every time, you're using an overly simplified strategy, but you certainly avoid these really, really nasty spots. What does Justin do? He bets a third pot. And this is where he says he screwed up, because he says he should have gone all in. You may think, what? Excuse me? But you got to realize that Bren's range in the spot is going to contain a lot of ace high that can now call, especially if it has a spade with it, right? But if you jam, you put those hands in a really, really nasty spot, because then, you know, your opponent's getting 2-to-1 pot odds, which is not particularly great, especially if we could be sitting over here with a set or a flush, right? So this is a spot where I think shoving probably is just right, but interesting to see Justin go for this. This is something I've seen Justin do a lot, where he uses the small bets like the solver very often does. But he says he screwed this one up. Let's see what solver does in this scenario. You guys hear my kids screaming outside? Hopefully they're okay. Solver does shove with the 10s every time. So solver shoving with a lot of these hands. These are a lot of flushes, etc. So shoving some flushes, shoving over pairs, betting small only with 6s, some nut flushes, and some bluffs here with the ace jack. Neat. Neat, neat, neat. Notice, though, a pretty good amount of shoving. You should be shoving here 48% of the time, betting small 16%, and checking, well, betting medium 16%, betting small 7%, and checking 23% only. You may be surprised to see that you actually should be jamming this turn a lot, because a lot of people look at this turn and think this is not a great turn, but it's important to consider your opponent's range, right? In the spot, our opponent's range is definitely going to contain random overcards. So if the opponent's range contains random overcards, you really, really, really do not want to let them realize their equity for free/cheap, right? And for that reason, you want to price them out, but whenever you bet 90K here, you do not necessarily price them out, which is a problem. However, Bren folds, we move on with our lives, and that's fine and good. It's just an opening 6s and 5s pre-flop. You can go over here and see what the pre-flop range looks like. These are hands that raise and then call the 3-bet. Notice, all the pairs, raise and then call the 3-bet. You don't really want to be folding the pairs to small 3-bets all that often before the flop, because they can make sets, and sets are very good. So we're raising all these hands. We're 4-betting some of these, folding some of these, folding some of these, 4-betting these up here, calling all these other hands. Okay? What if the turn is a different card? That's a very different situation. We're not going to go into all the various situations we can be in, because there are a lot of different situations in poker. I think I have another hand or two lined up. But before we go through there, we're having a sale at PokerCoaching.com. Can I tell you about that before we go through the other hands? Valentine's Day is coming up. Love is in the air. We're having a sale. It started yesterday. If you're on my email list, you probably already know about it. But we're releasing a new course on PokerCoaching.com very, very soon. If you all have watched my YouTube videos, which probably some of you have seen them, we had a video recently where Alex Fitzgerald, one of our excellent coaches at PokerCoaching.com, went through how to play pocket jacks. It was a gigantic video series, and he actually did that not just for pocket jacks, but for aces and kings and queens and tens and big aces and middle pairs and suited connectors and small pairs, all of it. How do you play these specific hands? Where he went through lots and lots of examples with these specific hands, discussing how to play these hands in these spots. That'll be up on PokerCoaching.com in the premium section in late February. So make sure you sign up and get access to that as a premium member. We're having big discounts right now on quarterly, annual, 2-year, and 3-year Poker Coaching premium memberships. You get access to everything that is on the site. We have live coaching webinars, kind of like this, actually, featuring me and some of the other Poker Coaching coaches. We have a ton of interactive hand quizzes. People ask me all the time, what can I do if I don't get to go to the casino and play all that much? Because, right now life is hectic. And the answer is, go through the quizzes. It's like we're sitting here together playing the hands, and you have to say what you would do and then get feedback on it in real time. It's like the next best thing to playing, or maybe even better, because it's like having your coach right there next to you. We also have lots and lots of GTO pre-flop charts available for you in the Poker Coaching app. Make sure you download the Poker Coaching app. There's a free version of it available. Check out Poker Coaching, or type Poker Coaching in the App Store. It'll come up. You can see some of the charts there, even if you are not a premium member. We have lots and lots of classes, lots and lots of videos. The new course coming out very soon. Also, a 30-day cash game challenge, a 30-day tournament challenge, and my tournament masterclass, cash game masterclass, all sorts of stuff at PokerCoaching.com. Why do you charge only less than $100 a month? Yeah, it's a good question. We're giving it away. I realize a lot of the other training sites charge substantially more for substantially less. It's okay. We're not trying to vig you. All right, here's our 30-day tournament challenge where every day, actually I have tournament and cash game challenges, where every day we send you an email with something very, very specific for you to study. And then we quiz you to make sure you actually are learning and progressing. There's never a better time than today to start improving your skills. And a great way to improve your skills is by studying on a very regular basis. You guys hear my kids going nuts? Hey, excuse me, please be quiet. There's our cash game challenge. Also, we have our cash game masterclass. This is a gigantic course, 32 plus hours long. We're consistently updating it, adding more features to it. I essentially teach you everything you need to know to crush cash games, period. Small stakes, high stakes, online, live, all of it. This course is not for sale. We don't really do the thing where we try to make you buy a whole bunch of stuff. It's just included. All of it's available for Poker Coaching Premium members. We also have my Tournament Masterclass, similar to the Cash Game Masterclass, 30 plus hours long. By the way, in all these, we also go through a lot of my tournaments that I've played, also some of our students' tournaments and cash games in the Cash Game Masterclass. This is everything you need to know to beat tournaments right here. Very, very, very clearly outlined for all of you. Here's roughly what you will see in our quiz dashboard, where we will show you what happens in the hand, who the coach is, roughly how deep you are, etc. And then you get a score based on how well you do. And it turns out if you get a lot of bad scores, you're probably messing up. If you get a lot of good scores, you're probably playing pretty well. Here's our coaches, including 2021 #1 online player in the world, Bert Stevens, draft ganger. He's been crushing it. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. We have myself, also Faraz Jaka, World Poker Tour Player of the Year as well. James Romero, he gets in there, battles hard. He actually won a tournament recently. You can go through, Google all these people. Many of the absolute best poker players in the world. Oh, here's Jonathan Jaffe. He just won something. What did he win? He won the $25,000 buy-in high roller tournament in Florida a week ago for $500,000. Good job, good work. Oh, there's James Romero. I knew he won something. He won the $2,000 tournament for $167,000 a week ago. Good job. Good job, good work. Here's Bert Stevens. You may not know him if you do not play online, but he is one of the biggest winners in online tournaments. He won $1 million last week. Good job, good work. He actually is going through and reviewing lots and lots of final tables and deep runs that he plays with Michael Acevedo. He wrote the book Modern Poker Theory, good, strong, world-class player, and they go through their hands and they bounce ideas back and forth. Those are great. Some of my favorite pieces of content on PokerCoaching.com, so make sure you check those out. Our coaches are crushing it, fine and good, but also our students are crushing it. As you see here, James Tays got second place recently for $5,000. Nice. We have Joe just the other day winning a tournament, $60,000 online. Nice. Gershon Distenfeld, been working with him for quite a while. He won a bracelet this summer for $200,000. Good job, good work. Anyway, this is just a small sampling of all the students at PokerCoaching.com, and they are crushing it, as we see. Disclaimer, results are not typical. Hate to break it to you. You're not going to show up and win every tournament you play. It's not how it works. But I can guarantee if you work hard and study at PokerCoaching.com, you will see your skills increase substantially. So anyway, here's what you're going to get whenever you sign up to Poker Coaching Premium. Sale ends very soon. Make sure you get in it. If you have someone in your life who you want to help get better at poker, send them a Valentine's Day gift. They'll enjoy it. They'll learn a ton. And if you're not 100% satisfied with PokerCoaching.com, if I fail to give you all the tools that you need to improve your poker skills and achieve your full poker potential, I do not want or deserve your money. Simple as that. If I do not help you get a lot better at poker, I have failed. And if I failed, then I do not deserve any funds from any of you. So, if you're not completely satisfied, let my team know within 30 days and we will give you a full refund. Don't really know what else you want from me. Do that. All I can do is make it legitimately free if you do not learn a ton. So, there you go. Check it out, PokerCoaching.com/Valentines to get into the Valentine Day sale. Let's go through another poker hand or two. Thank you all for sticking with me. 10-9 of hearts. Apparently Daniel Negreanu is playing in a final table. Is it literally right now? Maybe we should get off the show so y'all can go watch that. Let's see. Chris Moorman, the chip leader, raises it up. This is on the stone bubble of the $15,000 or $10,000 buy-in tournament. We're going to call and see the flop. Flop comes king 7-2. We check. Chris Moorman bets 30K. What do you do with the 10-9 of hearts? Take a second. Think about it. We are on the stone bubble with various short stacks around. We have a solid medium stack. Any news on if we won the Poker Personality of the Year award? Not yet. They don't actually tell you ahead of time. We won last time they did it. There's the award trophy. Thank you all for voting for me. And to be fair, it's not really a vote for me. It's more a vote for who has the best poker fans. And I appreciate all of you. I think I have literally the best poker fans in the game. We have a good group here, right? I see a lot of people like streaming or having YouTube comments that are incredibly toxic, to say the least. And we don't have that here, which is good. It means I've attracted the right people, which is what I'm going for, right? So once we check and he bets 30K, I think we only can call. Maybe we could put in a raise if we were not on the bubble, but on the bubble, we are highly incentivized to not get all of our money in. We really do not want to go broke here. But we cannot go around folding the 10-9 of hearts. So we call. Turns an 8. Combo draw. We check. He bets 90K. Weird spot. The problem with calling now is that if we call, we basically lose every time on the river whenever we miss, which is a bummer. Which is why you very often do want to be playing aggressively with your draws, right? But we are on the stone bubble, which is a problem, right? So what are our options? We can call and just lose every time on the river when we miss, which is fine. I will say Chris Moorman will get after it and bluff some portion of the time, so I don't really hate calling, because if we do call in this spot and we get there on the river, Moorman may just decide to bluff with all sorts of stuff. So I think I would have called in this spot. But Justin goes for the small raise. Now, he says in his notes here that Moorman should not be jamming much of anything in this scenario, which is kind of cool to think about. Because whenever we do check raise this turn, our range has to be really good. And to be fair, we should not be raising much at all in this spot. Really good made hands plus a few high equity draws. So this is it. We have the high equity draw. My fear in this spot is that we're going to get jammed on sometimes and have to fold, and that would be a disaster, right? But again, if your range is literally stuff like 2 pairs that should, that crushes Moorman's range, plus a few draws, you're not going to get jammed on very often at all. And by check raising here, we maybe have the potential to bluff sometimes. I'm not going to say we should bluff in this spot every time on the river, because we have one of the hands, well, we block a lot of the hands that are going to be auto folds, right? Because we block stuff like ace high flush draw. Well, we block stuff like ace 10, ace 9, queen 10, queen 9, etc. Which means when we check raise and get called, Moorman's going to be way more likely to have a made hand, right? We also block like random 10-9. So anyway, Justin does go for the min raise, picks up a nice little pot, and moves on. Nice. Justin went on to take, I think, 5th place the other day in the $15,000 tournament after making a deep run. Also, got in the money in the $10,000 tournament. He's crushing it. Glad to see it. Would you fold to a shove if in this scenario on the turn? Yeah, of course. Whenever you check raise in the spot and get jammed on, you have to ask what odds am I going to be getting, right? In the spot on the turn, we would have to put in, well, pot would be what? It'd be, can't count. Pot would be 1.7 million. We have to put in 600K, right? So we need to win a third of the time. Are we going to win a third of the time? Tough to know. Probably not, though, right? Especially if his range contains maybe some draws every once in a while. So this is a spot where if we count our outs, we have 15-ish outs, which is roughly 30-ish% equity, right? Not quite 33. But also, all of our outs are not good. Maybe sometimes the 10 or the 9 is good, but probably not if he's jamming. Also, there's risk premium for sure, because like I said, this is the stone bubble. You really do not want to go broke. So this is a spot where, yeah, if you check raise here and get jammed, you have to fold. I mean, really, whenever you check raise any draw and get jammed on, it's just a math problem. And what a lot of people do wrong is they put themselves in a spot where they check raise something like the 10 high and then have to call off with it because they check raise too big. I saw a few people in the chat saying they check raise to 250K or to 300K here. And if you check raise to 300K in the spot and they get jammed on, well, now you're getting amazing odds and you have to call it off with the 10 high on the bubble, which is not what you want, right? So it's very, very important to think ahead about how the hand can conceivably play out. And in this spot, I definitely do not like check raising any bigger than this because even though we may not have a ton of fold equity here, we actually do have a decent amount. And if you think about it, if our range is really good, we're not going to get jammed on very often at all. And if we're not going to get jammed on very often at all, then it's not necessarily free to make the raise, but this is a way to get some fold equity with a hand that would otherwise just check fold to a river bet a lot of the time, right? However, exploitatively, assuming Morin plays like Morin played a long time ago, I haven't played with him in quite a while, he will go after all spots. And if he's going to go for a bluff on the river very frequently, I don't really mind check calling in the spot because then we always get to see the river. We're clearly making a profitable call in this spot because we need to realize 25% equity. I just told you we're going to realize 30% equity, right? So it's obviously profitable to call. And then if he's going to bluff the river like ever, it's clearly a very, very good thing. That said, I'm not sure how he's playing today. I haven't played with him in a long time. But cool spot. Another cool spot from Justin. Huge thanks to Justin for lining up all these hands for us. I appreciate it a lot. Also, congrats on the final tables. Congrats on all the success. Before we wrap it up, again, make sure you check out PokerCoaching.com/Valentines to get a big discount on Poker Coaching Premium. We're continuously adding tons and tons and tons of content to the site, and I'm working hard to make sure that we just get better and better and better. I mean, if you have been a Poker Coaching member for a long time, you'll know that our first cash game masterclass and was something like 6 or 7 hours long. It was short. It went through all the common spots, but it was short. And I realized that. So we made a point to build it out. It became gigantic. The PowerPoint slide deck is like 3,000 slides long. It's ridiculous. It's very, 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 very big. And I'm continuously making sure that we are improving every aspect of the site. For example, you all said you wanted more joint webinars between the coaches. So I've been doing webinars with some of the other coaches. Bert Stevens and Michael Acevedo do webinars together a lot. Our coaches are out there crushing it on a regular basis. I realize that I don't get to play a ton of poker because I have a wife and 2 kids, and I run a poker training site. So I've been quite busy recently, but I'm excited to get back to the felt very, very, very soon in March for the US Poker Open. If you are going to be playing high-stakes poker tournaments, I definitely recommend studying what your opponents do, and I definitely recommend going through GTO solutions and learning and observing your opponent's tendencies. Because if you don't, well, you're going to be leaving a whole lot of money on the table. Good luck. Have fun. Make the most of your experience. I appreciate all of you being here today. Hope you all have a great week. I'll talk to you next time.